Weight Shift Control 13.3. Picture this. You're faced with the challenging prospect of an emergency landing in less than ideal terrain. Now, the terrain you choose plays a crucial role in the outcome of this scenario, and it's a decision that's influenced by factors like your pre-flight route and your altitude when the emergency unfolds. Let's talk about altitude for a moment. The higher you are, the more options you have. Consider this. A weight shift control aircraft with a 5-to-1 glide ratio flying at 500 feet above ground level has a significant radius on the ground to pick a suitable landing area. It's like having a broader canvas to choose from. The terrain below becomes a mosaic of possibilities, and your decisions shape the outcome. Now, imagine you're beyond gliding distance of a suitable open area. Here's where your judgment of the terrain's energy-absorbing capability comes into play. If you're up high, prioritize selecting the general area first, because appearances from altitude can be deceptive. Don't hesitate to pivot from your original plan if a better option presents itself. But, as a rule of thumb, try not to change your mind more than once, keep it decisive. When it comes to the approach, the wind, field dimensions, and obstacles become your navigational guides. It's a puzzle where the pieces seldom fit perfectly, and compromises are inevitable. A careful balance between wind, obstacles, and terrain is the aim, allowing for a final approach with a margin for judgment or technique errors. Sometimes, it's wiser to plan over an unobstructed area, regardless of the wind direction. Now, let's delve into specific terrain types. Constricted areas may seem tempting, but be cautious. Opt for open spaces where the ground is reachable. Rivers and creeks can be landing options, but watch out for wing snagging scenarios. Roads might seem like an option, but be wary of hidden obstacles. When it comes to trees, it's not the most attractive landing prospect, but survival is the goal. If equipped, consider using a ballistic parachute system, BPS, in tall, sparse trees. For shorter trees or without a BPS, slow down into the wind, make a nose-high landing, and use the treetops to hang the wing for a softer impact. Avoid direct trunk contact and aim for low, densely spaced trees. Let's imagine a scenario where a water landing is on the horizon. Now, before you embark on such a journey, make sure your pre-flight checklist includes personal flotation devices for both you and any passengers. It's like putting on a safety net before stepping onto a tightrope. And don't forget the hook knife. It's your ticket to a quick exit if things take an unexpected turn. Now, a sandy beach or a solid piece of land for an emergency landing is obviously preferable to the water. But life is unpredictable, and if a water landing is your only option, aim for shallow waters, about 4 to 5 feet deep. It's like finding a cushioned landing pad, but still deep enough to stand in. Picture this. You're cruising above the water, and suddenly, an emergency landing is imminent. Before you touch down, shed any items that might turn your exit into an underwater obstacle course. Kick off those boots and let go of anything that could slow you down. Now, there are 2 techniques for a water landing. Stalling just above the surface or using the ballistic parachute system, BPS. If you opt for the stall approach, fly directly into the wind to slow down your ground speed. As you get close to the water, slow down even more and gently push the control bar out to enter the water at the slowest speed possible. It's like easing into a pool, just hold your breath before the splash. Now, if you're equipped with a BPS, this could be your lifesaver. But here's the catch. Use it when there's a slight breeze or more, so the parachute doesn't become a watery entanglement. Deploy it using the technique we discussed earlier, take that deep breath, and brace for impact. But what happens once you're underwater? Swift action is key. Release those seatbelts, free yourself and your passenger from any restrictions, and swim to the surface. If disoriented, follow the light or bubbles, they're like nature's breadcrumbs leading you home. Now, let's talk emergency gear. Whether you're planning a short hop or a cross-country adventure, basic supplies like a mobile phone or radio, appropriate clothing, ropes, and some cash should be in your survival arsenal. But if you're venturing into the unknown, pack for the long haul, clothing for various climates, water, food, a knife, a signal mirror, and even a large space blanket doubling as a tarp. And let's not forget the terrain-specific items. Mountains? Pack a saw, shovel, water purifier, and a 100-foot rope. Heading for a large body of water? Add flotation devices and extra water to the mix. Desert conditions? Load up on water and hats for shade. It's like gearing up for a survival quest. Be ready for whatever nature throws your way. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of handling engine failure after takeoff. Remember that proper takeoff technique is your lifeline here. Lower pitch angles during initial climb provide the slowest possible descent rate if your engine decides to take an unexpected nap. But if it does happen right after takeoff, forget about trying to pull off a U-turn back to the runway. Instead, establish that proper glide attitude pronto and pick a field right ahead or slightly to the side. Turning back to the runway might sound tempting, but consider this. You took off into the wind, so turning downwind now means increasing ground speed and rushing your decision-making. Plus, you lose precious altitude during the turn, and there's a risk of being in a bank when you hit the ground, resulting in a nasty cartwheel. Turning back is no simple 180 degrees, it's more like a 225 degrees turn in one direction and another 45 degrees in the other, totaling 310 degrees. That's a lot of turns and potential trouble. On the flip side, going straight or making a slight turn gives you more time to set up a safe landing attitude. You can control your descent rate and ensure a controlled landing. If you're blessed with a long runway, a straight-ahead landing is usually your safest bet. If you're working with a tight pattern, a slight turn back to the runway might be an option, depending on what's straight ahead. Now, here's a pro move. Depending on your weight shift control aircraft's design, you might be able to pull off this maneuver with as little as 250 to 500 feet above ground level. But, experiment at a much higher, safe altitude first. Start high, low bank angles, and see how much altitude you lose doing the required turns. Find that sweet spot for bank angle to minimize altitude loss. Add a safety buffer for reaction time and no thrust from the propeller, and voila, you've got your decision height. Remember, this is advanced stuff and should be practiced under the watchful eye of your instructor. Picture an aircraft at 350 feet AGL, engine kaput. After a 4-second reaction time, the pilot pulls down the nose, decides to turn back, loses 50 feet. Then a 225 degrees turn costs 300 feet, another 50 feet for gliding back to the runway, and a final 45 degrees turn takes another 50 feet. Total descent: 450 feet, placing you 100 feet below the runway. Now, let's talk emergency descents. Sometimes, you need to get down fast. Whether it's an uncontrollable fire, dodging other aircraft, or bad weather, you've got to descend like there's no tomorrow. Initiate this maneuver in a turn to scan for other air traffic below and scope out potential emergency landing spots. A radio call might not be a bad idea to let others know what you're up to. Keep it safe with a bank angle of 45 degrees to 60 degrees to maintain positive load factors on the aircraft. Steeper bank angles mean a quicker descent, but don't go overboard. Extended periods of high G-forces and rotation can mess with your head or stomach. Stick to the manufacturer's limitations on bank and speed. Power to idle, but keep an eye on your airspeed. Don't let it go beyond never exceed speed or maximum maneuvering speed. This descent should be done at the maximum allowable bank angle and airspeed consistent with the procedure, so you lose altitude like a rock. But remember, recovery should start at an altitude high enough for a safe return to level flight or a precautionary landing. Practice this like your life depends on it, it just might one day. Avoid prolonged emergency descents to prevent your engine from getting too chilly. Now, go out there and master the art of controlled descents and calculated decisions.